I Hate Politics is a podcast about a human activity we love to hate. I am Sunil Dasgupta. We are at the height of the 2022 primary election season in Maryland, and for several weeks and even months, I've taken a worm's eye view of politics, focused close to home. But a few weeks ago, I happened to look up, and right across the fingertip of the Montgomery County line in the northeast by Damascus, in Carroll County, I found an epic battle that local politics can sometimes be made of. In June 2022, in the middle of Pride Month, Carroll County Board of Education took the decision to expand its political neutrality rule to include pride flags, which means they banned pride flags from schools. Those who wanted pride flags removed had in the past railed against any school closure during the pandemic, against masking and vaccine mandates, and they want nothing to do with critical race theory. Montgomery County has its right-wing candidates, but they are forced to remain at the margins. The right wing in Carroll County, however, is the power-holding establishment, which is now being pushed by demographic change riding on the shoulders of recent transplants to Carroll, like those of my guest, Stephanie Brown, who found herself in the middle of a raging political debate as she sought to defend the rights of her 13-year-old who goes to Carroll County Public Schools. If you're new to the show, I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools, and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society functioning precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. It is my hope that this podcast will help those who feel left out reconnect in our local communities. Music for this episode comes from Montgomery County percussionist Pete Chavette, who plays the vibes and the drums and writes his own music. You can hear him at Hank Deedle's Tavern on Rockville Pike every third Wednesday of the month, and on SoundCloud. In the news this week, as the January 6th congressional hearings captivate the nation, we who like local and state politics are poring over mid-June campaign finance reports. The Bethesda Beat has several stories breaking down the amounts raised and cash in hand by race if you are interested. The Maryland State Board of Elections campaign finance website is quite good, and it is a great way to spend several lazy evenings if you want to do the Watergate thing and follow the money. What I know is campaign money in local elections is not as determinative, at least not in the same way as they are in federal or even statewide races. In federal and statewide races, candidates have to buy television time because they can't knock on doors. There are too many. In contrast, few local candidates are ever able to raise enough money to buy television ads. At best, they can send out a mailer or maybe even two if they are in a county council district. For the at-large races, one mailer could very well cost $80,000. One mailer, one point of contact. Keep in mind, fundraising for the Board of Education and other down-ballot races is even harder. This leads to a lot of low information voters, which is a political science way of saying that voters don't know about all these positions and they don't seem to care. At least they don't want to spend the time it takes to truly understand the issues and what the candidates are offering. They're looking instead for some marker of endorsement that'll help them identify the right candidate without spending too much time figuring it out. Party membership is often the easiest way for voters to make these decisions. But in a county such as Montgomery, this is not easy. 3/4 of all registered voters are Democratic, and the primary is often more important an election than the general. Moreover, the down ballot races, such as the Board of Education, are required to be non-partisan races. And yet, voters, of course, at the polling booth ask about the party affiliation of school board candidates. Given these structural conditions, conventional wisdom holds that incumbency, the teachers' union endorsement called the Apple ballot, and Washington Post's endorsements are the three most powerful determinants of success in Montgomery County local elections. But the power of the Apple ballot appears to be waning in recent years, and the Washington Post is yet, as of Solstice Day in summer 2022, to endorse in the highly contested county executive race. This is quite extraordinary because ballots have been mailed out, and even those who follow politics closely are waiting to see whom the Post will choose. The Montgomery County Executive and the County State's Attorney's races are something of an exception in terms of spending. County Executive candidate David Blair, who lost in 2018 by 77 votes, is a self-funding billionaire who has already spent $3 million in the race. In 2018, he had spent $5 million. Hans Riemer, the county council member, has used public financing to raise $1 million for the county executive race. As of early June, the only publicly available local poll came from Data for Progress, a left-leaning think tank, and the poll put incumbent Mark Elrich, who has had the weakest fundraising, at over 30%, while Blair and Riemer trailed at about 15% each. The state's attorney's race features longtime incumbent John McCarthy against three challengers, local lawyers Tom DeGonia and Bernice Mureku North, and Prince George's County Deputy State's Attorney Perry Paler. Given the competition, this race has also attracted large amounts of fundraising. If you are undecided about a race and looking to hear directly and at length from candidates, look back in the I Hate Politics archives for our candidate interviews. We have interviewed 49 candidates over the last year, and while we couldn't still get to everyone, we tried to get to the leading candidates across the county and in some statewide races. The I Hate Politics bank of candidate interviews are incredible for another reason. They are focused on issues such as education, housing, economic development, jobs, transportation, public safety, environment, and offer a way to understand the debates within each of these issue areas. They also show how intractable some issues tend to be and offer glimpses of solution that emerge from the depth and the analytical nature of these conversations. You're listening to I Hate Politics. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. I'll be back with Carroll County resident in the middle of the political battle over LGBTQ rights in local public schools, Stephanie Brown. Stephanie Brown, welcome to I Hate Politics.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
The Carroll County Board of Education recently banned pride flags in county public schools, and you and your family were at the center of that decision. What happened?
In October 2021, my 13-year-old child made it official at school that they were to be referred to as Ash and that they used they, them pronouns. Later on in that week, they brought in a small pride flag, and during that day, they were told to kill themselves over 10 times by a variety of students. When Ash came home after school, they requested that I buy pride flags so that they could give them to friends to show support. And we discussed, that they should report this to the administrators at the school. When the incidents were reported, the school started an investigation, and we were informed that students couldn't carry flags in the school. That's when Ash decided that they wanted to donate the flags to the teachers. And we were again told that the teachers couldn't display the flags in the school. At the November Board of Education meeting, Ash went up and spoke about what happened at school and asked the Board of Education what they planned to do to make sure that this didn't happen to any other students. During the political neutrality discussion, several of the Board of Education members and the chief of schools stated that these flags were allowed to be displayed by teachers, and they even encouraged it. So the next day, I emailed the school administrator and asked again to donate flags to the teachers, and I was given approval. We sent 50 flags to Ash's school, and the teachers that wanted them put them on display. Ash decided after that they wanted to put flags in all the CCPS schools. So January of this year, I spoke at the Board of Education meeting and thanked the board for making it possible to put flags in Ash's school and let them know that we'd be putting flags in all the schools in Carroll County. In late February, early March, I got in contact with PFLAG of Carroll County, and they offered to purchase the flags for Ash's plan. I communicated back and forth with central office, and by early March, we had gotten approval for the flag donation, as well as all the information I needed to alert the administration at each school when we would be dropping off the flags. April 7th, I emailed all the administrators, letting them know we would be dropping flags off on Friday, April 8th, and we delivered hundreds of flags to the schools on that Friday. By Saturday morning, the Concerned Parents group on Facebook and the Moms for Liberty group on Facebook were freaking out about the indoctrination and grooming going on in our schools because of the pride flag donation. By Monday afternoon, Tuesday morning, several of the schools were told to stop the distribution of the flags, and by Tuesday, some schools even had the flags removed. By Wednesday, at the next scheduled Board of Education meeting, the board decided they needed to implement a flag policy to keep something like this donation from happening again, because apparently it violated the political neutrality policy.
Can you tell me what the political neutrality policy is in Carroll County Board of Education?
We've had a political neutrality policy for a while. They did just recently in January modify it to make it clearer that teachers and staff are to remain politically neutral and not treat their students as a captive audience. Part of it states that employees should avoid discussion of political issues, parties, and candidates during classroom instruction. The modification of this policy was a call to action from the local Moms for Liberty and Concerned Parents groups in an effort to keep the mythical CRT from being taught in our schools.
So can I ask, does that cover discussion, for example, of the January 6th attack on the Capitol?
If they were to discuss the January 6th attack on the Capitol, the teacher would have to remain extremely neutral and allow the students to control that discussion. Whether or not the facts support what the students are saying. The teacher really can't do much to bring the facts into that in this community and with this school board because of how they view things. There's a very loud opposition to the facts surrounding the attack on the Capitol on the 6th.
From a practical point of view, I mean, if you're teaching AP US history, right, and you are going over slavery, I'm not sure how you can teach that without, politically neutrally, so to speak.
The problem that has come up here is they have these extreme groups have turned any mention of privilege, any mention of diversity, any mention of equity, any mention of inclusion, anything that labels somebody, all falls under this category of CRT. Even though CRT is a college course in critical race theory, if you say anything about, the white slave owners, you are violating you're teaching CRT.
So in Maryland, as opposed to Virginia under Governor Youngkin, Carroll County seems to be where the right-wing attacks on public education seem to be most concerted, well-organized. Do you understand why Carroll County is sort of ground zero for this?
Traditionally, Carroll County has been a very, very conservative county. But I believe that the pandemic opened up the classrooms to the parents. And a lot of the rise of the Concerned Parents group and the Moms for Liberty group here over virtual learning, the masking, when they started seeing a lot of what was being taught in the classroom, it triggered them. Along with the fact that they all of a sudden, everybody was home. Everybody was, they had the kids home from school. They were trying to work from home. Everybody was stressed out. And Carroll County is rural. We have a lot of small towns. We're separated by farmland, large areas of farmland. A large portion of the community wanted their kids back in the classroom, and they wanted them in there without masks. A lot of this drama over the masks and the virtual learning was due to a mistrust in the medical professionals and our government, which fall in line with the extreme conservative points of view. So once this Concerned Parents group had the momentum over the masks and the virtual learning, they moved on to the fight against CRT, diversity, equity, and inclusion, started book banning, and now we're in the LGBTQ issues and the health curriculum issues.
Has Carroll County banned any books yet?
We have not officially banned any books. Lawn Boy, which is one of the books that everybody was shouting about, was pulled from the library shelf in the one high school that it was in, and it can only be signed out with parents' approval.
Is there a larger list, or do you just know about Lawn Boy?
There were 2 or 3 other books that they tried to ban, and I don't think either one of them got very far. This one, the Lawn Boy, was the one that they made the biggest fuss over. And that one, I think it went up to the superintendent who made the decision.
In your view, the pandemic opened up a space for right-wing activism in Carroll County school politics.
We were, I believe, the first county to bring the kids back into the schools in Maryland. Our Board of Education filed a lawsuit against the state of Maryland over the mask mandate earlier in the school year. So yeah, the masking and the virtual school and all of that, Carroll County, the right wing actually won in all of that. They got us into the schools. We had some schools shut down throughout this time because they had outbreaks that were severe. My kid's school is one of them. The numbers of outbreaks and the number of positive cases in our schools has been absolutely through the roof, to the point that they changed their metrics on how they, reported whatever they were reporting.
Yeah, how did they change their metrics?
If you look at our dashboard, you would see that 1 week we're at 1,500 cases, and then all of a sudden the next week we're down to 150 or something. And it's because they changed how they were posting the data on our dashboard. They stopped posting the current cases and just posted the new cases and things like that, to make it appear that we were moving in a different direction than we were.
Can you speak a little bit about the groups that formed on the right to fight this battle during the pandemic and have thereafter continued to this anti-LGBT, anti-CRT platforms?
So the first group that was formed, it was the Concerned Parents Group, and it was formed by a Brian Thompson of, I believe he's of Westminster. He's been speaking very vocally at all of the Board of Education meetings, on his blog site for the Concerned Parents of Carroll County. So Brian Thompson created this group to organize and fight against masks and virtual learning. He wanted his kids in school, and he wanted them in school immediately. Off of that group branched a chapter of the Moms for Liberty group. The Carroll County chapter is run by a woman named Kit Hart, and she and Brian Thompson have been really close in all of the fight against virtual learning and all of that. They've become the driving force behind a lot of the current drama over, the CRT and the flags and LGBTQ issues. They're a group of parents, both of them, that are pushing for extremely conservative values. They, the traditional marriage and, everything should be taught at home. Everything in school should be, the only things in school should be taught are reading, writing, and arithmetic. They're very loud, and they have the ear of the Board of Education. There are 5 voting members on our Board of Education, and out of the 5, Tara Battaglia is in both the Moms for Liberty group and the Concerned Parents group. The majority of those group members are on her friends lists, and she speaks to them constantly. Then you have Donna Savigny. Her husband is a member of the Concerned Parents and Moms for Liberty group and is actually very active in those groups. You have Kenny Kyler. He swears that he is not in the group. Just because he likes something that's in the group doesn't mean he's in the group. He is a very traditional Carroll County, resident. I think he's been here for years. He's into athletics. He and his son run, or used to run, a wrestling organization here in Carroll County. He's just, it's all athletics to them. And then the other member of the board that's conservative side is Marcia Herbert. And her sister was the previous president of the teachers union here in Carroll County.
You said something that is I found very interesting. You said the majority of the community is conservative. Democracy, well, requires that your elected representatives also be conservative. Correct? How do you get around that? I mean, you're trying to change and bring reform, but the majority of the county is conservative and they elect people they like. So what is the solution here?
The voter registrations are showing that the conservative Republican is no longer above 50% of this county. This is, more recent data than, what we've had, before. So we've got a lot more independent and a lot more Democratic voters here in Carroll County than we did before. However, our candidate list is still heavily Republican. Brian Thompson is the chair of the slate of the Carroll County Citizens United that supports Tyra Battaglia, James Miller, and Steve Whistler, which are the three most conservative candidates for the Board of Education. Now, granted, this is a nonpartisan race, but they've made it very clear that they're the conservative Republican candidates for the Board of Education.
You mentioned, the right-wing candidates for the Board of Education. Are there candidates that are more moderate or even to the left that are running in Carroll County Board of Education elections this year?
Yes, we have three amazing candidates running for the Board of Education, one of which is Dr. Patricia Dorsey. She's an incumbent. She is running to reclaim her seat. Dr. Amanda Jaskowski and Mr. Tom Scanlon are both running as well. Tom Scanlon is a former educator in our school system. And I don't know much about Amanda's background, but I've spoken with her at length, and the three of these candidates are pushing for support of our teachers. They're trying to promote a more inclusive environment in our schools for all marginalized and non-marginalized populations. They want to bring equity to our curriculum. One of the big issues in our school, if you look over here at Francis Scott Key High School, they have a Spanish class. But if you go 15 minutes up the road to Westminster High School, they have, I believe, French, Spanish, ASL, German, and something else. They have 5 languages, where this high school 15 minutes away in the more rural part of town only has 1. So there needs to be some kind of equity in our class, offerings to these schools. They're listening to the students and they're listening to the teachers. Our teachers are several steps behind on their pay schedule. I think they just got a 1% bonus. They're not being compensated and they're constantly under attack. And the only candidates that are trying to stand up for our teachers are Dr. Dorsey, Dr. Jaskowski, and Mr. Scanlon.
So do you expect the teachers in Carroll County to come out in big support for these candidates? Because I asked because you mentioned earlier that there is this kind of dense network that is interconnected, with the union and the Board of Education and conservative politics. Will the teachers come out in big support for these candidates, you think?
I hope so. From my conversations with several of the teachers, that communicate or that talk to me, they're pushing for their colleagues to get out and vote. The Carroll County Education Association, our teachers union, has put Dr. Dorsey, Dr. Jaskowski, and Mr. Scanlon on their Apple ballot. This flag issue that we've had, that's just a symptom, or that's not the big issue. The big issue is how the schools aren't inclusive. We've had slurs painted on parking spots at high schools. We've had fights break out over racial slurs. We've had kids on sports teams being attacked by racial slurs in the middle of a game. These things are just pieces of the big whole, and they need to be dealt with, as a whole.
On one part of this big whole is the curriculum equity that you talked about. And so there was a controversy as well in Carroll County over the family life curriculum, which is the Maryland mandated family life curriculum. And there it seems there is movement, but not really. Can you explain what's going on there?
So the Board of Education created or populated their family life committee that is supposed to look over the materials for the family life health curriculum. They tasked this committee with modifying the state mandated health curriculum framework. The Family Life Committee got a hold of the framework that was passed to us from the state, Maryland State Department of Education. They removed every reference in this framework to LGBTQ. They also removed topics like identify racism and intersectionality and describe their impacts on sexual health. And they also changed a lot of the wording. For instance, they changed the word demonstrate to describe how to properly use contraception. They were pushing for a very conservative, traditional family values kind of viewpoint in our health curriculum, pushing aside all the things that these students need to know to make their way in today's world. So it became a big discussion, and the board realized that they were going to be in violation of COMAR, the Maryland state law, if they pushed through this modified family life curriculum instead of approving the state mandated one. So what they chose to do is they made the state mandated one, they approved it as the default health curriculum. And then because parents are allowed to opt out, they put this modified version as our opt-out option. So if you opt out of the state mandated health curriculum, here you have this highly modified version.
Despite all this, right, I want to ask you about your continued love for Carroll County, especially because you moved from Montgomery to Carroll not too long ago. Both you and, it seems, Ash remain optimistic. So where are you finding this optimism right now?
In spite of everything that's going on with the school board and a lot of the other political issues in the county, the community here is absolutely amazing. The place is beautiful. I'm surrounded by farmland. I'm not surrounded by skyscrapers and curated trees in the middle of cement. It's a beautiful area to live. And even with all of the drama over the pandemic and the masks and the virtual learning and the hate that we've seen towards people of color and LGBTQ, the community has shown that they're not for all these traditional conservative values. They have started to come together and stand in support of each other, regardless of our differences. the students in our school system, they've mobilized, they've found their voice, and they're using it. They've been at the past two Board of Education meetings protesting, coming in, speaking at the public comments, telling their stories. These are students that, for the majority of their school careers, have kept their stories, what they've dealt with, silent, kept it to themselves, not reported the hate they've received, not reported the slurs they've been called, or even like physical attacks. They haven't reported those either because they were afraid and they didn't feel they had the support. But now here they are standing in front of the Board of Education saying, this happened to me. And they know that they have the support of students, the teachers, the community. And that is why we're so optimistic. Ash and I have seen what the community is willing to do to stand up for the people that they need. They need our support. And I can't be anything but optimistic.
Stephanie Brown, thank you for coming on I Hate Politics. I hope your optimism bears out.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
What lessons can we draw from my conversation with Stephanie Brown, a Carroll County resident, community activist, and parent of a gender non-conforming 13-year-old? First, there is a political battle in neighboring Carroll County that reflects the great division in America today. A conservative county looks with trepidation at demographic change and takes knee-jerk reactions to the pandemic, to the health curriculum, to the advent of new ways of thinking. An old power structure clings to power as newcomers seek to change their government to their own liking. This confrontation between old and new America is playing out in the heart of Deep Blue, Maryland, within 15 minutes from Damascus in Montgomery County. From Montgomery County, we sent busloads of canvassers and get out the vote volunteers to Virginia, the Carolinas, and even to Georgia. Time to look at Carroll County. Second, even as the state of Maryland moves ahead with education reform, actual change is not going to come from state efforts alone. The county boards of education have real power to determine the direction of their public schools. Ignoring school board elections is not just a bad idea, but downright dangerous at this point, as the vision of public education, of John Dewey, to take one example, which lies at the foundation of universal schooling enshrined in the Maryland Constitution, is now under threat. The threat to public education in its various forms, from the right wing, from the education technology industry looking to privatize a great public enterprise, from the left that has devalued learning itself, is one of the biggest post-pandemic battles we have to fight. Lastly, in the middle of all this political fighting is a 13-year-old with inalienable rights, but without a vote or income or other ability to protect those rights. And yet, with a simple flag, they have questioned the authoritarian instinct of their community. It is simply awe-inspiring to listen to the story of a 13-year-old who, on being told to kill themselves multiple times in a day, rose up the next day to return to school with even more pride flags for their friends, for their teachers, and for the entire community. And then, despite all the cynicism, has continued to believe in that community. That's all for this episode. You've been listening to I Hate Politics. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. Music for this episode comes from Montgomery County percussionist Pete Chavette, who plays the vibes and drums and writes his own music. You can hear him at Hank Needle's Tavern on Rockville Pike every third Wednesday of the month and on SoundCloud. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please email us at ihppod@gmail.com or reach out on Twitter at ihppod. I hope you'll subscribe and share the show as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. See you next time. Have a great start to your summer.